Welcome back to the podcast. This is your host, Brother Sean Brumfield, and we got a special episode here today. And just to introduce everybody, I got Brother Ryan Brown with me.
Hey, everybody.
And I've got two special guests with us that have been in revival with us this week. And I've got Brother Roger Peyton and Sister Lara Peyton.
Hello.
Hello.
So glad to have you guys this week and giving us the time to have a little interview with you.
Yeah. The first thing he said, though, was that music wasn't gospel. Nobody heard it in the microphone, but I watched him as he mouthed it to Sister Lara.
Yeah. You should have expected that with me, though, I think.
It definitely wasn't Church of Christ. I will say that.
No, it wasn't.
Definitely.
Because it would just be dead air.
Yep.
Do you remember the time that you preached a revival for us and he missed like the first 3 nights and you asked if he was in jail?
I don't remember that. I'm sure it happened.
But
I never did. Did I get an answer? Were you in jail?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I guess it depends on if you say being at home with Sister Melissa would be like jail.
I think we did have COVID then.
Yeah, you guys were sick is what it was. Yeah. And so he got up there and it was when you returned. He's like, well, I'm glad to see you're back. I thought you was in jail or something like that.
Yeah. Well, because in the next couple of nights, he came up to me and goes, I didn't know you had a lick of talent in you, because one night I played bass, one night I played lead guitar, the next night I sang, and he's like, is there any talent in that body?
So when I told him that you were scheduled for this one, he said, I'm not missing a night because I don't want him to think that I'm in jail.
Not this time.
That's my gift, is to provoke people to good works.
Yeah, sure. It worked. I've made it every night.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Sunday night, Nick.
And
We'll
you've
find out.
shown some talent.
Oh, thank you.
A little bit.
No, wait a minute. Sunday night's Easter Sunday night. You can't say maybe.
Well, depends on how good does Sunday morning.
True.
It all depends on the preacher, I guess.
Yeah.
And how much chocolate he gets in the afternoon.
Put me out. No, but with you coming, you just know you've had a run with doing evangelizing and pastoring, and now you're back to evangelizing, and just kind of wanted to talk with you and get your story and how you've come to Christ and how you grew into those roles. And if you don't mind sharing with us how you got saved.
Sure. Of course, I was raised in church, and so, heard sermons and altar calls and all the things that go along with growing up in church. But I was probably under conviction for a couple years, really, just 15, 16, 17-year-old boy, knowing that, I needed to get saved. And it was between my junior and senior year. We were at a storefront church. My mom was in a singing group, and so we went to a singing, and they had preaching there, and that was just my night. So it was 1982 in June. And so I lived here in this area. We lived in Mason, graduated from Mason before it was cool to be from Mason. And so now it's big money people. And I told somebody the other day, they got more ball fields than we had classrooms. So I've grown up in this area, but then we got married in 1984, and neither one of us really grasped holiness fully, and we just started praying and reading our way into it. And so that was a growth for us. We've done in our early marriage, we really did a lot of bus routes. At one time, we had 60 or 70 kids coming on buses. We had two buses, 3.
We had about 4.
Yeah. And so we had a lot of that. And we did that till I didn't really preach my first revival till I was 30. And so went and pastored a church at 30. It didn't go very good. I was there 100 days. So I told somebody, my pastor in my first church was 90 days, same as cash. So it did not go very well. Matter of fact, it was a horrible experience. Ironically, it was in the same town that our oldest son's pastoring now. Different church, different people. But so he's been there and had success, but we flopped big time. And so we went back to the home church, and then we started traveling. Altogether, we've pastored 3 churches, but we've traveled more than we have pastored. We've traveled probably 20 years, I would say. And so sung with the kids. We've got 4 kids and they all had music ability. And so that was that's really what I feel called to do. I do pastor when the Lord makes me, but well, for one thing, I don't think I'm any good at it. And number 2, it's not where my skill set is. Mm-hmm. And so not that I won't pastor again, but yeah.
Add something here.
Yeah, but getting the mic, it pays the same.
We just resigned pastoring a church in Tennessee on March 1st was our last week. And he announced it about, 6 months before?
It was a long goodbye.
A very long goodbye. But the night he announced it, of course, no one in the church knew it except our deacon. And every man and every woman in the church was sobbing as they go out the door.
Well, they heard a rumor that I was staying.
No, they did not.
So they were crying.
And they had went one time like 5 years without a pastor.
Yeah.
I think they're really concerned that maybe they'll go through all that again. But every woman that went past me, they're like, we don't want you to leave. We don't want you to leave. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. My husband says he's done and we're going back to evangelizing. So, but anyway, when I got home that night, he said, I'm used to people crying when I come, not when I'm leaving.
It was bad. And we still love the people.
Yeah.
They're great folks. And we're praying the Lord sends them the right pastor, sends them a good one this time. It reminds me of the story of the woman who, after hearing her pastor say he's leaving, she was sobbing, crying, couldn't stop, met him at the door, and he's trying to cheer her up, control, situation. And you'll make it be well, he'll probably be better than I ever was. And she said, that's what they said the last time. So who knows? But yeah, we've traveled. We pioneered a church in 2003. We went to Arkansas in Little Rock and started a church. We were there 6.5 years, and then our son Stephen took it. He was there almost 10 years. So the church still going. They've had their moments of success and some struggles, but still going. So we helped pioneer that church, and then traveled again. We've had 2 stints of traveling. This is our 3rd tenure of traveling. My spiritual ADHD kicks in and I can't stay focused on stuff, so I have to do something different. So.
It's kind of funny because we started this revival here, and Easter just happened to kind of run the same week as April Fool's this year. And so when April 1st rolls around, my wife wanted me to get up and play an April Fool's joke and resign the church before service ever got started, and basically just say, well, we got brother and sister Peyton in, and we're just going to let them take over. And, we're resigning. We're going to go. We're leaving you in good hands, and just let it go at that. And I told her, I said, well, we kind of would really like for this revival to go good, but that might be the jump start. I don't know.
If you pulled that number, I would be in that truck so fast. Yes, it would be.
You would have beat me out the door.
Yeah, there would be no. It would be like poof. What happened to the preacher?
Yeah, no, that's it. So, talking about, obviously, there's 2 different facets. So I don't feel like that I am a revival preacher. I've never really felt that way. I've preached several revivals now, but I don't feel like that I do good in the revival side of the thing, evangelizing and stuff. And I've been more working in a church, youth pastor and assistant pastor stuff. That's pretty much been what my ministry has been. So I know that you take two different approaches really as pastoring and as evangelizing. And so how do you said you took some churches. So what did you glean from that, between evangelizing and pastor? Is there things that you learned pastoring that you use evangelizing, or vice versa?
There's a big difference, of course. We were sharing at dinner last night. The blessing of pastoring is you are there for long-term results. And so it's the difference between hunting and farming.
Mm-hmm.
And so with evangelizing, it's sort of like hunting.
Mm-hmm.
You go kill it, drag it home. But with pastoring, you're planting, you're weeding, you're fertilizing, you're cultivating. But in the very essence of it all, you're focused simply on one thing, trying to help people.
Yeah.
And both callings are in that. And so if a pastor feels like he's helping his people, he's got a good situation. As a matter of fact, and I've said this before, I said it at the church that we just resigned. One of the biggest reasons people leave a church is because they feel like that their church has gotten hardened to their ministry.
Yeah.
And God will. He'll switch out a pastor so that touch is fresh.
Yeah.
But that can go on 20, 30 years, that the church is still fresh to the touch of the pastor. And as long as they're receiving the help he's given, then there's no reason why it just doesn't go on and on and on.
Right.
But yeah, in the end, the focus is always going to be trying to help people.
Yeah.
I think that one of the biggest questions that I have is, through your progression in ministry, it's been rotational into the evangelist and then as pastor into evangelism to pastor. Was that hard at first for you to grasp mentally? Because I think sometimes in church you're conditioned to where you take ministries as a progression, as progress, and then you get to one and like you stay there. You know what I mean? I feel like that's something that's been, I don't know if it's just the culture of our church world, but to be able to say, I've built this up and then now the Lord's called me to move into something else. Was that something that you had to recondition yourself for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really know that I really formulated it that way, but it was because, for instance, guys that are preaching great revivals right now, Enoch Snow and Aaron Fuller and different ones that are just really great young men. They preach in a style that, frankly, only the youth can.
Mm-hmm.
If I tried to preach like they preach, I wouldn't last 30 seconds. So you have to stay focused. Number one, you got to stay in your lane.
Yeah.
And whether you're pastoring or evangelizing. But there again, the core element is just trying to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we just had a great service tonight. There was no preaching. But then there's times when that's the tool the Lord uses with pastoring. There's an advantage. I love to preach. I don't know if it's because I'm getting old and I need to move slower, but you can go back and we went through the book of Philippians. We went through the book of James. We have gone through several books, and there's just, that's the way the Bible was written, and frankly, the way it's meant to be studied.
Yeah.
And so that you can't do that as an evangelist. That's just not going to happen. You're more of a firefighter as an evangelist. And honestly, as an evangelist, the dumber you are, the better off you are, as far as church problems and things they're going through.
Of it,
yeah, because we get a lot of criticism as Pentecostals. We say, well, the fruits, they operate, the gifts aren't operating. I've never been in a service yet where I didn't see some gift in operation. I'll give you an example. When a preacher gets up and preaches and he knows nothing about the situation the church is going through, and yet he preaches a sermon right on target, that's a word of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we sometimes discount things like that. Or when we're wrestling with something and the preacher comes down our row and it's just specifically a word for us, that's a gift of the Holy Ghost in operation. So where with pastoring, you know that marriage is in trouble. Their finances are terrible.
Yeah.
Their teenagers are giving them trouble. And I remember a preacher in Oklahoma City, he had a church that kind of developed into be a family church. And so not only did he pastor him a long time, but it was all his family. So he was really mowing hay one night, and he said, I know you all say that I'm just preaching on this because I know about it. Well, the Bible says we know in part and we prophesy in part. And he said, I'm preaching the part I know and the part I prophesy. So, but as pastor, and you know, they know I know, and I still got to deal with it. I still got to preach on it. So, but as far as separating the callings, they are different, for sure. But I never really struggled with that transition. I feel like that if I were left to my default settings, it's traveling and preaching and evangelizing.
Mm-hmm.
Grace empowers me to pastor, but as soon as it lifts, I'm out of there.
Yeah. I know here something. This is my first actual tenure of pastoring. And I know it's been kind of one of those deals where it's like, I know so much. So then I start praying, Lord, send somebody so that they can preach it.
Definitely.
Because if I do it, they're going to, well, he's just preaching on me. I'm never going to say anything again.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of something that I've dealt with too, is where I've actually had people say, now, who do you tell if I talk to this, where does this go? And I have to reassure it's between you and me.
Right.
If it's something I've got to deal with on a grander scale, like if it's, you don't want somebody singing in the church or something like that, then I would bring, other person in. Brother Sean would know, just in case I'm gone and he's running the service, but for the most part, it's kind of a reassurance. It's only going to be me. So then I have to pray, Lord, send somebody that doesn't know a thing. And I can sit there and be like, I don't talk to these people. I like how the Apostle Paul said, I came to you. Basically, I didn't want to know anything among, I didn't want to know your troubles. I didn't know what problems, what was going on. I just wanted you to see the demonstration of the power of God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is something as ministers, it's really what you pray for, that they see the power of God, you have the anointing, and you can actually make a difference. So,
I've told my kids this, talking about the difference offices between the pastors and evangelists. There's nothing more powerful or more beautiful than a pastor that still preaches with passion to his people.
Mm-hmm.
There's no evangelist can touch that. There's no camp meeting can touch that. And so when you see a pastor preaching with passion to his people, that is the master stroke right there.
Yeah. So Sister Peyton, are you from the Mason, Cincinnati area, or?
No, sir. I'm from Richmond, Indiana. Richmond, Indiana.
Richmond, Indiana. Okay. And so I overheard you telling Brother Peyton you got saved at a young age.
Yes.
So you got saved at 7, was it?
Yes, I got saved when I was 7. So we kind of have different bringings up. I was raised in church, and I think just at a young age, it just, of course, my mother had heart issues, had a lot of issues going on. But I think I just realized, okay, I've got 2 options here. I can go to heaven, I can go to hell. And it just makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And in a 7-year-old's mind, it was just like, why wouldn't I accept Christ? Why wouldn't I want to go to heaven? Who would want to go to hell?
Right.
And so just at a very young age, I just went to the altar and asked the Lord into my heart. Now, Roger did mention this. We both came from kind of worldly backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were not unequally yoked when we married.
Yeah.
Because we were both kind of on the worldly side. But we were married in 84, and then Brother Carpenter came in 85, right? And one thing that I believe is very important for women, you've got to pray about standards.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just be taught by the pastor what's right, what's wrong. You've got to have it in your heart.
Yeah.
You got to pray about it. You got to let God speak to you about it. And I remember, I mean, you got to realize where I was at. When Brother Carpenter come, my hair was extremely short. I wore makeup. I wore jewelry. I mean, the only thing I didn't do is I didn't wear pants.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the only thing I did. And when he came, he hadn't, at one point, he starts preaching on our midweek, the basic principles of holiness. But before that even started, I just started praying about things, about standards and about things. And I remember I was on the piano, I played the piano, I sang, all that. And I remember one night coming back, because the pastor was about to preach. So I go back and I sit down in my pew and I said, Lord, I am the youngest member of our church. Why are you dealing with me about this stuff?
Yeah.
every woman in this church has their haircut.
Mm-hmm.
Every woman in this church wears makeup, jewelry, all this stuff. But I felt it God dealing with me.
Yeah.
And we also had a television at the time. My parents had given us a television and we gave it back to them. We decided we didn't want a television. This is before we ever had children. We're like, before we ever have kids, we don't want them to get hooked on television.
Right.
And then we get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so we got rid of it before we ever had kids. But I felt God just starting to deal with me.
Yeah.
Lay down your makeup, lay down your jewelry, stop cutting your hair. I just felt God dealing with me at those things. Of course, I didn't see the future that Roger is going to be doing missionary work and evangelizing and pastoring churches and all that our future was going to hold. But I remember that night, I was so frustrated. I'm like, God, why are you dealing with me? I'm the youngest member here. But God had a reason.
Yeah.
God had a purpose. And I'm just glad that I listened and I obeyed God because I can see where God's led us.
Yeah.
And he's used us since then. That if I had not agreed to obey God, we would never have been accepted in the holiness band.
Yeah. Yeah.
But God had a plan.
Yeah.
And I listened. So
I appreciate you saying about the standard.
Yeah.
About not just taking it from the pastor. Because I feel like, and it's unfortunate, and it's not everywhere, but I feel like one of the number one questions that you get if growing up, you know, my grandpa, he was kind of at the time you kind of had, and I know there's now you can't really say there's a such thing, but at a time there was kind of those middle of the road churches. You know, it didn't fit in with the realm of the ultra strict, but it didn't fit in the realm of the worldly either. You kind of had those middle of the roads. They kind of are dying out, you know, because you're either going to be one way or the other. But I remember growing up and just getting saved and asking young people that I was never around that lived a more strict standard than I did. And I would ask them questions like, well, why are you doing this? Or why are you living this way or something? And the number one answer I would get is because, well, that's what my pastor told me, or that's how my church believes.
right.
And that's one thing that I've tried to instill here. And I know that my dad did too, of I've got my standard. We believe holiness, and we've got our holiness standard, and we're going to go through it biblically, the biblical holiness standard. But I don't want anybody just to take my word for it.
Right.
I want them to pray about it. I want them to read about it. I want them to have my wife, before her, women not cutting their hair. I'll be honest with you. I couldn't give you scripture or why and all that. I talked to my wife one time about it. I mean, she's preaching to me. You know, this is what the Lord laid on my heart. She's given it all to me. So I truly do appreciate that, because I think any young person or even older person that doesn't know, that's one thing that they really need. You got to get it for yourself. You can't just do it because somebody else tells you, or your church, or whatever the case may be.
I have seen so many times, Brother Ryan, that when people have only conformed because that's what the pastor said, that's what the church said, in time, it slips.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't in their heart.
Yeah.
They didn't pray it through and get it from God.
Yeah.
If you don't get it directly from God, it's going to slip.
Yeah.
It's not going to hold.
Yeah.
And in time, those standards will slip.
Yeah.
And I've seen it so many times. I mean, I'm 61 now. I've been around a long time.
Yeah.
That is a long time.
And he's 60. Don't even act. But that's just how it is.
Yeah.
If you don't get it in your heart and you don't hear it from God and see it in the Word, I mean, read it for yourself. If you don't get it in your own heart, that God spoke to me that I'm to do this, I'm to quit doing this and quit doing that and quit doing this, and you just conform because that's what the church is doing, those things will end up slipping away.
Yeah. Yeah.
You won't stick with it.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes so much further than that too, because that teaches you the voice of God, how to follow after him. And because it kind of leads into my next question is, during these times of transition in your all's life, has the Lord, well, like I'll say, for instance, for my wife, sometimes I'll feel like I need to go visit a church somewhere, and I'll say, and she'll say, well, I was praying in that, I felt like that we need to go there too. When in those times of transition in ministry and learning, already knowing the voice of the Lord, did the Lord work with the two of you together and come to that conclusion, or is that that might be a really private question to be asking? But I feel like
Totally fine.
I can
The
answer
answer
this.
is no.
okay.
I can answer this.
I'm regretting inviting you. Can you go eat pizza?
I just seen brother and sister Ronnie Baker. Do you all know the Bakers?
Yes.
Oh yes.
Yes.
We just seen them in a camp meeting, and they had come and preached at our church, and so I walked up to them. I said, did you all know that we've just resigned the church? And they're like, no, we didn't know that. And I said, well, we did. And Sister Connie's like, how are you doing with that? And I said, well, it was my husband's choice.
Yeah.
I can't say it was my choice.
Yeah.
I prefer pastoring. I prefer working with people and seeing them grow. And
Yeah.
I think it's the mother in you.
Yeah.
You like mothering people.
Yeah.
And I said, so it's not been easy for me. And Brother Baker spoke up and he said, but you have to follow.
Yeah.
Whatever it is your husband has decided this is the direction from God, as a wife, you just have to follow.
Yeah.
And I said, you're right. You're right. And I said, I can't say it's been easy to make the switch,
Yeah.
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 but I mean, he prefers traveling. I prefer pastoring,
Yeah.
so that's where we're at. But I've just learned I've got to trust him that when God speaks to him, okay, we've been at this church 4 years. It's time to go back to evangelizing again. I just have to follow.
Yeah.
I have to follow that.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you asked that question without causing a fight. I really appreciate that. Any other hand grenades you got over there?
I guess for me, it's when you look at young couples in ministry, they're all, I don't want to say gone with the wind, but kind of they feel like they both have to be, God has to pull them both that way, and oftentimes I know I've made that prayer, Lord, if this is your will, convince my wife that we have to do that.
And that's not wrong.
Yeah.
I would say up until this her default gifting and preference is pastoring. So anytime we have to make decisions that are different than that, it's hard for her. I totally agree.
Yeah.
There are going to be commonalities that are necessary, things that you have to agree on. Things, because whether you're pastoring or evangelizing, it's going to mean financial sacrifice.
Yeah.
It's going to mean forsaking other opportunities. There's things you can't do and do this. And so those are the things you have to be in agreement on, that, hey, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to pay that cost. And even though, we kid some and are serious some, as far as she likes to pastor, and I don't even know that preference is the right word. There are certain things your personality is drawn to because that's who you are.
Right.
You make up. But even in that, both of us, the question is never asked, should we be in the ministry?
Yeah.
That question was settled years and years ago, and we don't ever revisit it. It's never a discussion.
Yeah.
So what was it like, or what was the process of, because I always find it interesting when people say that they felt like pioneering a church. My father-in-law pioneered one long before I ever met, Becca and all of them. But they pioneered Vanceburg, and it was in an old tire factory. My wife tells us about it all the time. She said it was kind of funny when they got the old storefront. It was an old tire store. So when they were cleaning it out, they'd come out and they were black from all the rubber dust, and it smelled like old tires and all that stuff. But it started, and that church is going on. In fact, has got a very beautiful building now. They're going on, very strong. So what was that process like? First off, if God lays that on your heart, I know there's got to be a struggle there, because you're going to an area that doesn't have a church and you're going to start a church and try to get people to come. That's not a difficult thing to do.
And it's not your territory. How does a guy from Mason get all that to Little Rock?
Well, we had traveled 6 or 7 years, so we were familiar with the area, and, we knew about. There were two places actually we were praying about. One was Columbus, Indiana, and the other was Little Rock, Arkansas. And the last 2 years of our evangelizing had been financially, schedule-wise, and everything had been the most productive. We finally got to the place where we had finally created some momentum, and the Lord was helping us. Yeah.
Really busy.
And so, and yet there was a leanness in it where you almost felt like there's a transition of feeling. And so even though we were having better revivals, we were busier than we ever were, there was a leanness in it. And it was just God kind of dealing with us that there's a transition ahead. So I talked to Brother Lloyd Shoecraft and kind of expressed my dilemma in the two places we were praying about. And he said, you need to go and park in Little Rock for a week. And he said, I guarantee you the feeling will either get stronger or weaker. Well, by the end of that week, it was settled. We knew that's where we had to be.
Yeah.
So
what was that process like? Just finding a place to go, getting people to come,
We had made contact with one family that were driving quite a ways to go to church. And we rented a conference room in a hotel for, several months. I don't know how long it was. We were still living in our fifth wheel in a place we had it parked. And so we had church there for several months. Then we rented a storefront. And then eventually we're able to buy a building. And that's where the church is still to this day. But it was tough. I mean, for the first year and a half, we were paying all the church bills plus paying our bills. And for whatever reason, I could not find a job that would pay its way. It was awful. I mean, I had more W-2s just kept, but then finally the Lord turned it around. But it was tough financially. People who talk about pioneering a church, I always laugh because if they think that somebody's going to just send them a monthly support check, I'm going to tell you, don't go unless you're ready to pay the freight yourself.
Yeah.
Unless you're ready to say, you know what, for the first 2 or 3 years, the church bills are my bills.
Yeah.
I'm going to pay the rent. I'm going to pay the electric. I'm going to pay the insurance, whatever it is, it's there. And if you're not ready to do that, you're not ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one family that come and joined us were the Atwoods, and it was a husband and wife, and they had 3 kids, I think, still at home, which was good because we had teenagers.
Yeah.
And they had teenagers. And so that was a good mix. But she approached us actually at Lloyd Shoecraft's camp meeting and said, we've heard through the grapevine that you are coming to the Little Rock area and we live in that area. We would like to join you. We'd like to come and join with you. And they have been wonderful friends.
Yeah.
Great folks.
They're great people. And he was the deacon of the church and just, a huge help.
His jokes weren't ever really funny, but he tried.
I think it's hard to go in competition with somebody like you that just
he tried to be my setup man.
Yeah.
And just never. He struggled.
So what did you do to promote that church growth?
We knocked on a lot of doors. We ran a van. We had a man buy us a church van. We've always had a heart for kids and feel like that's the key for everything.
Yeah.
You show me a church with no kids, and I'll show you a church that's just waiting on Jesus to come.
Mm-hmm.
So we had some success with that. I will tell you, we got up to 35, people. It wasn't like we had a super, we had a super big crowd, but it was, we had a great church. I mean, folks were glad we were there. And then Stephen came in 10 years and was the pastor there for 10 years. So he was really the one who established it, paid off the church and got him totally out of debt and all that.
Yeah. When the Lord told you it was time to move on, I know that transition's always hard.
Trying to start.
No,
Not
that one. but I would have a feeling that because you pioneered it, that one had to be more difficult than the most in some ways because you.
The answer would be no.
Okay.
It wasn't, and reason is because bent toward traveling.
Right.
And so once the grace to be there was gone,
Tell them your dentist story.
Well, that was before when we were evangelizing.
Right.
So, yeah, when we were going to go full-time evangelizing, that stressed me out. I was getting ready to quit my job and go evangelizing. So our dentist was a Christian man, and so I woke up with this jaw swollen. I mean, yeah. And so I went to the dentist, and so he said, "Are you under stress?" I said, "Well, we're waiting on our son to be born, and as soon as he's born, I'm going to quit my job and we're going to travel full time." And so, yes, I'm under stress. He said, "You're grinding your teeth in your sleep. You're so stressed." And he said, "Tomorrow, the other side's going to be swollen from that, and it'll be worse." And he prophesied exactly right. But that was just the stress working out. So,
Wow.
so it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Since then,
But
you
then,
know,
didn't he take you into another room and you guys had prayer
yeah,
together?
we had prayer,
I mean,
and
it was.
but transitions are tough. I mean,
Yeah.
we make light of it and talk about, she prefers this and I prefer that. All transitions
Yeah.
are tough.
Yeah.
The 6 months from the time we told, Wesley Chapel that we were leaving until we actually did our last service was very stressful.
Yeah.
Because you still love the people.
Right.
It doesn't. I told Brother Ryan, our pastor, I said, the people cried and the men cried, and he said, "Well, maybe you should stay." I said, "Brother, sympathy is not a burden.
Yeah.
You feel people's
Mm-hmm.
pain.
Yeah.
You do care about them, but that's not a burden of grace to be there." And so it takes that burden. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that in the 4 years or the times we passed, those things wane. They do.
Yeah.
They do. Hey, in marriage, passion and love wane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just part of it. And anybody who thinks that it doesn't, they're just ready for disaster. It does.
Yeah.
And so, and burdens in the ministry are the exact same.
Yeah.
So they're the same way. I'm not sure if I even answered your question, but it's kind of rambling.
No, that's all right. So how did you two come to meet then? Because you both have somewhat similar stories of,
How we met?
yeah.
My first.
I was in jail ministry and she was in there.
No,
And
that is not true. He embellished that. That is not true.
I don't know why I invited you. You're killing all my good stories.
My first cousin's wife attended his
Twice
church.
removed.
No. My first cousin's wife attended his church, and I would go visit her most summers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had just went to visit her and went to church with her. And when church was over, we just got up and left. We were gone. Well, he comes and looks Dorothy up and says, "Where's your niece?" It wasn't really a niece. I was really a first cousin. But anyway.
Twice removed.
And so he asked for my phone number. And so she called me first and she said, "Is it okay if I give him your phone number?" And I'm like, oh boy.
Here we go.
Like, oh boy. I had just went through 2 breakups
Yeah.
of boyfriends. And so I wasn't real sure I was ready for another relationship.
Just say it. You said he can call, but I am not a bit interested.
That's what So he did call, but he pursued
Yeah.
greatly
Yeah.
and he won me.
Yeah.
So
It's
that's how we ended up together.
my wife met me. Well, I think you were the one. You guys were talking about it the other night, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Her sister told us the story.
So you got it from Leanne then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a great story. I love telling that story because it really gets Becca going. I love telling it from the pulpit. I understand. I get why you do what you do because it is fun at times.
Yeah, but sometimes it can.
It'll get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is kind of funny because Brother Mike preached for my dad when he pastored at his first church in Coleraine, and I was the only teenage boy. Now, my brother was the next one underneath me, but I was 14, 15 at the time, I think. No, I take it back. I was 16 at the time because I was driving from Coleraine to Lebanon to go to school every day. And they came. It's the first time I ever really met Becca and Leanne. And for me, I kind of sound cliche when I say that, but for me, it was like love at first sight. I seen Becca and I was like, I really had a crush on her instantly. I didn't know till later, 2 years after the fact, that whole conversation happened between her and her sister when I come walking in down the aisle and her sister looked over and said, "Oh, they've got a teenage boy here." And the first question that my wife asks is he cute? And I could have gone without this, but she said, Leanne said without hesitation, no. And 2 years later, she talked to me, and when I finally convinced her to date me, she told me, she said, I seriously thought you were a dork. Didn't want nothing to do with you.
Wow.
Well, she's obviously got discernment.
Yeah, that's what she does. I told her, I said, well, the Lord showed you.
Obviously.
She told me that she said, because her dad was full-time evangelizing, and then he was pastor or youth pastor, started a church. So she's been on all facets of the ministry, even more so when we met than I was. And she said that she always said she'd never marry a preacher. That was number one. And then she told me I was a dork. And I said, the Lord just took revenge on you twofold, because I was preaching when we got married and I'm a dork. So he just said, look, I'll show you not only going to marry a preacher, but he's going to be a dork at the same time. And not cute, obviously, because
ain't God good.
That's the opposite. When me and Alyssa and I first was in service together, neither one of us seen each other. And actually today is our sixth year anniversary.
Oh, yeah?
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I came from Shadeville to come here, Brother Russell McDonald, during your guys' homecoming. And I guess the house was packed that night.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was hard to see anybody. And I guess she stayed on the drums all night, and I was up on the front, and not one time did we see each other until finally my brother came and visited once and was like, I think she'd be a good fit for me. So it's crazy how things work out.
That's cool. 6 years. That's great.
Yeah. Praying for many more.
Yeah, there you go. So one question I have to ask you, because we've been making jokes about it, and poor old brother Jonathan wasn't able to make it tonight. So you've done a lot of traveling. You've been throughout. Have you ever spotted Bigfoot?
Well, I've seen some, when I was in pastoring, I had a rule, and this is what I told him. I said, well, my preference is no facial hair on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And from the men either. So to answer your question, at some camp meetings, I've seen some women that may be his sister. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, you could have that. Appreciate you guys coming on with us tonight. I really do. Thank you for talking with us.
Yeah.
All right.
It's been an honor to have you guys. Really, really did enjoy it. So I hope everybody enjoyed this special episode. Let us know, and we'll catch you guys next week. See you.